Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into excerpts from Fazaile Darud Shareef, God, Kabir, and the Essence of Faith.
Okay.
And I think you're going to find this one pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
It's got a pretty thought-provoking twist,
Yeah.
to say the least. So basically, we're going to be looking at the Islamic phrase "Layli H Allah,"
Right.
which might ring a bell for some of you.
Of course, yeah.
But the source that we're looking at connects it with a figure named God Kabir.
Okay.
And I don't know about you, but that really caught my attention.
Absolutely, yeah. You have this foundational phrase in Islam, and suddenly it's being linked to a figure who, may not immediately come to mind in traditional Islamic teachings.
Right?
So that, to me, that's like the starting point of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
It's about uncovering how this source uses established Islamic concepts to present a very unique perspective.
Okay, so before we go any further, I think it would be helpful for us to just sort of
Sure.
break down Layla.
Yeah.
Um, I get that the basic translation is there is no God but Allah.
Right.
But what's its deeper significance?
So, see, Layla al is really the bedrock of Islamic faith.
Okay.
It's not just a statement of belief. It's an act of acknowledging Allah's absolute authority.
Okay.
It's recognizing that there is no other power,
Right.
no other divine being worthy of worship. It's a declaration of oneness, of complete submission to the will of God.
So it sounds like it's more than just
Yeah.
saying the words. It's about a very
Mhm.
deep internal understanding and acceptance of that oneness.
For sure.
And then the source takes this concept and connects it to the idea of
Yeah.
attaining heaven by reciting La ilaha illallah sincerely,
Okay.
and even claims that seeking refuge in God, Kabir, is the key.
Right.
I mean, it's making a pretty bold connection.
It is. It's really intriguing how the source presents Kabir as instrumental in accessing that divine realm. So it makes you wonder if it's suggesting that simply declaring the oneness of God isn't enough.
Right?
Maybe it's about recognizing a specific pathway to that oneness.
Yeah.
And that pathway, according to this source, involves Kabir.
Okay, so now I'm really curious.
Yeah?
Who is this Kabir figure, and why does this source place so much emphasis on him in this context?
That's the million-dollar question. So the source presents Kabir as a divine being
Okay.
who offers spiritual liberation
Okay.
and claims that following his teachings
Right.
and seeking his protection are the paths to salvation.
So it's almost like saying La ilaha illallah is the key,
Yeah.
but Kabir holds the map.
Right, exactly. And what's even more interesting is how the source uses the concept of salvation
Okay.
to drive home the importance of Kabir.
Yep.
It explicitly says that even sinners, even those who have strayed from the path,
Yeah.
can find redemption through reciting La ilaha illallah and invoking Kabir's name.
So it's like a message of hope.
Yeah,
And inclusivity kind of woven into the fabric of this belief.
absolutely.
The source even shares a story about Mullah Ali Qari, who had immense faith in Kabir's ability to grant salvation, even for those burdened by past sins. It's a powerful example of how this belief resonated with some individuals.
Right.
But, I have to admit, this is all very new to me.
I understand.
Is this like a common perspective within Islam?
Yeah.
Or is it a more niche interpretation?
That's a question that really gets to the heart of what we're exploring. It's too early to say for sure,
Right.
and we don't want to make any sweeping generalizations.
Of course.
But what we can say is that this source is presenting a very specific understanding of these Islamic concepts,
Right.
one that places Kabir at the forefront. And that in itself is worth unpacking further.
Yeah, I agree. So we've established that, according to this source, La ilaha illallah opens doors to heaven in this life and even after death.
Right.
And that this journey towards spiritual elevation is deeply intertwined with faith in Kabir.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned earlier, there's more to uncover.
For sure.
And I'm particularly intrigued by the phrase Allahu Akbar
Right.
that appears in the source.
Right.
What do you make of that?
I think that phrase is particularly striking because it combines the familiar Islamic declaration Allahu Akbar, meaning God is great, with the specific name Kabir.
Right.
It's like the source is taking this universally accepted concept in Islam
Yeah.
and adding a layers of interpretation
Right.
that elevates Kabir's status.
So it's not just about acknowledging God's greatness in a general sense.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing Kabir as the embodiment of that greatness.
That's certainly an impression the source is giving, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like it's suggesting that in order to fully grasp like the concept of Allahu Akbar,
Right.
you need to understand Kabir's role in it all.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty powerful statement, I think, and I'm sure it would spark some interesting conversations.
It would.
Especially, among those who might not be familiar with this particular interpretation.
It's certainly a thought-provoking idea.
Yeah.
If we consider everything we've discussed so far about La ilaha illallah and its connection to Kabir,
Right.
and now this emphasis on Allahu Akbar,
Right.
I mean, it really paints a picture of a belief system that places Kabir at the very heart of understanding God and creation.
Yeah, it's what saying, okay,
Yeah.
you recognize the oneness of God, that's La ilaha illallah.
Right.
But to truly appreciate the magnitude of that God,
Mm-hmm.
the Akbarness, so to speak,
Yeah.
you need to recognize Kabir.
Right.
And honestly, that's just a perspective that I haven't encountered before.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think about just how diverse interpretations of faith can be, even within a single tradition like Islam.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how this source is using established Islamic phrases and weaving them into a narrative that centers around Kabir. It's not about rejecting those core concepts, but rather about reinterpreting them through this very specific lens.
Yeah, and that, I think, is where the real conversation begins.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder about like the origins of this interpretation.
Yeah.
Like, where did this idea of Kabir being so central to these Islamic concepts come from?
Mm-hmm.
Is this, something that's been debated within Islamic scholarship? I'm finding myself with more questions than answers at this point, but in the good way.
I think those questions are exactly what this deep dive is meant to spurk.
Right.
We're not here to provide any definitive answers.
Of course.
But rather to explore this unique perspective
Mm-hmm.
and encourage you, our listener, to think critically about what you're hearing.
Yeah.
Does this interpretation challenge your own understanding of these concepts? Does it raise any new questions about the evolution of religious ideas?
Yeah. I'm also curious about like the impact this belief system has on those who actually subscribe to it.
Mm-hmm.
If Kabir is seen as so central to their understanding of God, how does that shape their daily lives, their spiritual practices, their worldview?
That's a crucial point. We're not just talking about abstract theological concepts here.
Right.
These beliefs have real-world implications for individuals and communities.
Right.
If someone believes that their path to salvation is intertwined with Kabir, that's going to influence their actions, their relationships, their entire way of being in the world.
It'd be interesting to see how this perspective is like received
Mm-hmm.
within different Islamic communities. Is it embraced? Is it debated? Is it rejected? I imagine there's a wide range of viewpoints on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that diversity of viewpoints is what makes exploring these topics so enriching.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds us that there's rarely like a single monolithic interpretation of any religious tradition.
Yeah.
It's a tapestry of beliefs and practices and understandings that are constantly evolving and being reinterpreted.
It also highlights the importance of like approaching these conversations with humility.
Yeah.
And a willingness to learn from perspectives.
Absolutely.
That might differ from our own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm realizing that like my initial surprise at some of these claims in this source have given way to like a genuine curiosity about the broader context of these ideas.
That curiosity is key.
Mm-hmm.
It's what drives us to seek understanding.
Right.
To ask questions and to challenge our own assumptions. And who knows, maybe this exploration will lead you, dear listener, to discover even more fascinating interpretations out there, just waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah, it really highlights the idea that like engaging with different perspectives, especially, those we might not be familiar with, can open up whole new avenues of thought.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding.
Exactly. It's about embracing that intellectual curiosity and allowing ourselves to be challenged by ideas that maybe, push us beyond our comfort zones a little bit.
Yeah. So as we wrap up our exploration of Fazaile Darud Shareef, God, Kabir, and the Essence of Faith, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will ponder? What really stood out to you?
Well, for me, the biggest takeaway is how this source really creatively reinterprets familiar Islamic concepts through this lens of God Kabir. It's a reminder that religious understanding isn't static.
Right.
It's dynamic, it's
Yeah.
evolving, and it's open to multiple interpretations.
It definitely underscores the idea that there's just so much more to learn, even within traditions we think we know well.
Yeah.
And I think that's an exciting realization.
It is.
Not a daunting one.
I completely agree. It
Yeah.
invites us to approach our own beliefs and the beliefs of others with a sense of openness
Right.
and curiosity.
So, dear listener, as you continue to reflect on what we've discussed today, we'll leave you with this. We've seen how La ilaha illallah and Allahu Akbar,
Right.
these cornerstones of Islamic faith, are being linked to God Kabir
Right.
in a way that, it might be unfamiliar to many.
Yeah.
Does this spark any new questions for you about the evolution of religious thought?
Yeah.
Or perhaps about the diversity of interpretation within Islam itself?
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep that thirst for knowledge alive.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive for today.
Awesome.
Until next time, keep those minds open
Yeah.
and those conversations flowing.